Welcome in, everybody, to the flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of horns247.com, joined as always by the managing editor of Horns247, Taylor Estes. And Taylor, we are recapping Texas's 55-14 victory at Kansas in frigid Lawrence, Kansas, in which Bijan Robinson, in my humble opinion, after rushing 25 times for 243 yards and 4 touchdowns, probably cemented himself as, if not one of the most underutilized superstars in Texas football history, with one more game to play for old Bijan. But he put some mustard on it today, Taylor. He dominated this game. The Texas defense was outstanding. Special teams came through. It was a warm day at the spa for a frigid day in Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really ask for a much better game. I would say, aside from the passing game, I know that they didn't really have to rely on Quinn Ewers, Chip, but I would say this. All offseason, we talked about how with a first-time starting quarterback, a freshman at that, a quarterback's best friend that is just trying to learn the ropes of the college football game is a good running game. And it just so happens that Texas has arguably one of the best running back rooms in college football. You even saw some of the young talent show up on the field, later in the game when the game was already basically, in Texas' favor at that point. But yeah, there's Bijan Robinson. My goodness, when he goes to the state of Kansas, let me just put these numbers out there for you, Chip. He has played in 3 games in the state of Kansas in his career. 2020 and then 2022 against Kansas State and then 2022 against Kansas today. He has rushed for 624 yards, 8 touchdowns, and also added 85 receiving yards to that stat line in just 3 games in his career in the state of Kansas. I mean, he showed out in a big way. And, I think Texas fans really just got to embrace him right now because he probably only has one more game left suiting up in burnt orange, but no doubt made a statement today, and much needed statement too, coming off of that TCU performance where the offense couldn't do anything and kept their small chances of making a Big 12 title game still alive, Chip. And Bijan Robinson, my goodness, you can't talk about this one without talking about him.
Yeah, I mean, he owns the state of Kansas like Jalen Ford owns the state of Kansas. Jalen Ford with another interception, with Kansas driving in Texas territory. His interception leads to another Bijan Robinson touchdown. Of course, he had the interception right before halftime against Kansas State. But Taylor, I think when you look at this, you say, what if? There's a ton of what if, because what if Texas could have gotten into an offensive rhythm like Baylor did against TCU today? Baylor running it for over 200, nearly 250 yards against TCU in a last-second 29-27 loss to the Horned Frogs in Waco. But Baylor ran it down TCU's throat, and you just get frustrated thinking about what if with this football team. What if Bijan Robinson kept getting the football in the fourth quarter against Oklahoma State when they were breaking down? What if, Bijan Robinson kept getting the football against Texas Tech in the fourth quarter? And, that's the frustrating part of this, because this kid is special, and Texas, as you mentioned, now has these flickering backdoor hopes of getting into the Big 12 title game. They'll need Kansas to beat K-State in Manhattan next week, because Kansas State handled their business comfortably against West Virginia, 48-31, I think. But Kansas State still in the driver's seat to play TCU in the Big 12 title game. And this is just, I'm sitting here thinking, is that performance by Bijan Robinson enough to get him in the mix for the dang Doak Walker Award, at least? I mean, you look at the other top running backs in the country, and I broke this down in my instant analysis that is free for everybody to read at horns247.com. Chase Brown of Illinois is, the probably the leading rusher among the top 5 running backs in the country. Chase Brown of Illinois, but he's had 80 more carries than Bijan Robinson. He's got 309 carries for 1,582 yards. Bijan is at Bijan's at 229 carries for 1,401 yards. He's now tied with Chris Gilbert at number 5 all time on UT's rushing list with 3,231 yards. He's 97 yards behind Jamal Charles, who's probably the other leading candidate for most underutilized superstar during his time at Texas. So kind of appropriate that they're right next to each other on that all-time rushing list. Both are going to end up being 3-year studs. But you love the game plan. And Taylor, I was scared to death because Texas is first. They've won the toss and elected to receive the football. And they, on their first possession, Bijan runs for 7 yards. And then he runs for 7 yards again. And Sark goes away from the run, starts throwing it, and they go 5 and out. And you're going, what are you doing? You're not going to do this again, are you? And then on the next possession, Texas ran it 9 straight times. It was not just Bijan, it was Roshan, it was, Jordan
Keelan
Whittington.
Robinson, Jordan Whittington, yeah, everyone.
and thank God, because they just ran it down KU's throat and they just kept running it. And Sark never wavered, never outthought himself in this one, never went back to a struggling quarterback. And that's the frustrating part, but yet, the satisfying part. And I get that Kansas's defense has been ripe for running the football, especially using tempo, which Steve Sarkisian did early in the game. But you have to do it. You have to prove it. You can't commit the penalties. You can't turn the ball over. Texas didn't. And it was just great to watch. If you're a Texas fan, or you're a Bijan Robinson fan, because that is how you pictured it for Texas, after that Iowa State game 4 or 5 games ago.
Yeah. And it kind of was like Sark got off of his script a little bit in certain situations. I feel like, the start to the game, no doubt, Chip, that, when Texas has to punt in the first series of the game, the opening series of the game, I was like, please don't put Quinn Ewers in this situation again, for the love just of our Horns 24/7 members, like, sanity. Please don't do this. And
Please.
For ours too. Please. Like, my
Please.
goodness, after coming off that TCU game, I mean, understandably so, Texas fans were irate when you get hired as the head coach of Texas because of your offensive prowess, because of how well you call plays. And then for the offense to not score a touchdown, and then you kind of open this game with a similar game plan, it seems, from a play calling standpoint. It's just like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But to his credit, he changed that, got it rolling. That was actually the only series that Texas actually punted the ball. Every other possession that Texas had ended in a touchdown, except for, I believe, the final one. It was a, what was it? Turnover on downs or something like that. So, but still, punted the ball 1 time in the game. You'll take that all day, and twice on Saturday. I know it's normally twice on Sunday, but twice on Saturday in this instance, Chip. And, I think one thing that you have to give a lot of credit to that may get overlooked, coming out of this game because of how much of a show that Bijan Robinson put on, is the defense. I mean, this defense is playing lights out. I feel like we've been kind of talking up the defense a bit this season, a little bit more than probably others want to even hear at times, especially when you look at the stat sheet and there's a lot of yards given up or anything. But at the end of the day, this Texas defense has been really, really solid for the majority of the season in keeping teams out of the end zone. I mean, Texas gave up, 14 points to Kansas. So 2 touchdowns. They gave up 2 touchdowns last week in the loss to TCU. They also were the only ones that did score a touchdown in that game. So this Texas defense, from year 1 to year 2 of Pete Kwiatkowski, defense coordinator leading the charge, I mean, it is night and day different. And they come out guns blazing, it seems like, every single game. And they've been playing, especially as of late, really, really solid as the game goes on. It's not the similar showings that you've seen. Even when the Texas offense has started to struggle in other games, the defense has really kept them in the game. And that's all you can ask for. And they're being asked of a lot right now. And obviously they got the job done too in this game. But I really think they're probably not going to get enough credit that they probably deserve coming out of this win, just because of how dominant the run game, especially with Bijan Robinson, was. All of the headlines are probably going to be in us talking about it too, about the offense, about Bijan Robinson's 243-yard, 4-touchdown performance. But credit to the Texas defense and Pete Kwiatkowski. I mean, my goodness, it is like night and day better than what it was last year.
Yeah, and let's give some love to the Texas defense, because Jahdae Barron had another nice play early in the game. I'm going back to the early part of this game when the game was still in doubt who was making plays. Jahdae Barron had a nice play, sniffing out a bubble screen again. Mo Blackwell. There was a Mo Blackwell sighting, and he knifed through the line and had a tackle for loss early in the game. And you're like, hello, Mo Blackwell. There were 5 tackles for loss. They did not sack Jalen Daniels, but they had 5 tackles for loss. Barron Sorrell, Alfred Collins, Devin Richardson, they all had tackles for loss, in addition to Jahdae Barron and Mo Blackwell. And what I really liked about this game, Taylor, is Kansas with that triple option, Jalen Daniels making his return to the Kansas offense. He was averaging 6.4 a carry coming into this game. Devin Neal was averaging 6.7 a carry coming into this game, and neither one of them made a sound on the ground that mattered. In fact, Texas held Kansas to well under 100 yards rushing until the final minutes of this game. And Devin Neal was held to 13 carries for 51 yards. That's less than 4 yards a carry. You'll take that all day. And Texas ends up running almost as many rushing plays, run plays, 57, as Kansas ran total plays, 59. So that tells you how well the Texas defense did. Kansas came into this game top 5 in the nation in third down conversion rate at 51.7%, and converted only 36% in this game. So Texas showed up big on third down. They got a little lucky because the touchdown pass that Kansas threw to Jared Casey, the star of last year's KU win over Texas, was negated for a very questionable and ineligible man downfield. Mike Pereira, the Fox official analysis guy on television, said that he was only 2 yards downfield, not 3 yards downfield. So Texas got a little lucky there. But again, Jalen Ford with another big interception, and just play after play in the run game just sort of took the will of the Jayhawks. And Taylor, we should mention Roschon Johnson suffered a lower leg injury in this game, but Steve Sarkisian said after the game, not serious. And Roschon Johnson feels very confident he'll be back for the Baylor game next Friday. Remember, it's a short week. We're heading into Thanksgiving week. Texas will play the day after Thanksgiving at 11 a.m. So Sarkisian noting that not only is it a short week, we don't even really get much of a walkthrough before the game on Friday morning. So Texas really going to have to be sharp, because Baylor looked pretty darn good running the football, making some clutch plays to put TCU in peril of losing their undefeated season today. I don't know if anyone saw the end of that game, but TCU had to rush its field goal kicker onto the field as time was winding down, and they launched that thing with 2 seconds left, 40-yarder Griffin Kell made it. TCU wins 29-27, but Baylor was this close to pulling off that upset, Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not a Baylor team that you can overlook. I know that their record probably does not, say the whole story, honestly, Chip. I feel like this has kind of been an up and down season, I would say, for Baylor a little bit, especially coming out off of that, the Big 12 title season last year in Dave Aranda's second year on the job. But yeah, I mean, this is a Baylor team that can surprise you. Obviously, I mean, TCU is number 4 in the country currently in the college football playoff rankings. It was an away game for TCU. Baylor and TCU always seem to go toe to toe. I feel like whenever they play each other, I mean, it's just like you just never know what you're going to get. You may get a 71-68 game, or you may get what you got today. But Chip, one thing I want to point out here, and this is pretty astounding, I thought, at halftime of the Texas and Kansas game, Bijan Robinson had 172 rushing yards, I believe it was.
Yes, 19 carries for 172 yards, 9.1 a carry.
Yes, and Kansas as a team had, I believe it was 136 total yards, at halftime. So that just shows how dominant of a performance that Bijan Robinson had. When you look at Roschon Johnson's status going into the Baylor game, obviously you want to have him available. I mean, Texas has one of the best 1-2 punches probably in college football between Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. And if he's unable to go, I would say that doesn't help Texas in any way. But I mean, my goodness, look at what Jonathan Brooks did in this game. I mean, this is a guy that really hasn't even had the chance to do much at this point, honestly. And he finished his game with over 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. So, 2 of the 6 rushing touchdowns came from a guy that is technically, fourth string, isn't he? I believe he would be. So
he's about to be first string next year.
Yes.
And Texas fans got a look. They got a glimpse at the running situation for next year, because Jonathan Brooks, man, he runs to the right. He almost falls down. He catches his balance and then took off like a rocket down the sideline for that 70-yard touchdown run. You're like, whoa, he is running away from people. And Jonathan Brooks has been really good in the very limited touches that he gets. This guy's averaging over 6 yards a carry and has been patiently waiting his turn. It's coming. And I for one, think the Texas running game is going to be in fine shape. This kid, Jonathan Brooks, is legit, in my opinion. He catches it really well too. And we know that, Bijan Robinson is an unbelievable weapon in the passing game. And that's the thing. I mean, Taylor, I mentioned earlier, where's Bijan Robinson in the mix for the Doak Walker Award with guys like Chase Brown of Illinois, Blake Corum of Michigan, Quinshon Judkins of Ole Miss, Kendry Miller of TCU. Bijan Robinson, in terms of all-purpose yards, is second only to Chase Brown of Illinois by 60 yards. And again, Chase Brown has 309 rushing attempts this year. Bijan only 229, 80 less. And yet Bijan's almost equal to him in all-purpose yards.
And prior to today, Chip, Bijan had 5 rushing touchdowns more, I believe it was, than Chase Brown. I think Chase Brown entered this weekend with 7.
That's right. And he had 2 today. So he's at 9 rushing touchdowns and 12 touchdowns total. Bijan is at 16 rushing touchdowns and 2 receiving touchdowns. So yeah, he's 6 touchdowns ahead of Chase Brown in terms of the all-purpose, running and receiving. And no one compares to Bijan in terms of yards per catch. That 16.5 yards per catch is a staggering number. And so we'll see if this needed to happen a week ago, obviously, when the whole nation was watching against TCU. I don't know how many people were watching this game on FS1 with a broadcast crew I've never even seen or heard of. But I thought our man Emmanuel Acho did a heck of a job hosting the Fox pregame, halftime, postgame show.
Yeah,
I
I
might
agree.
add. Longhorns everywhere. But yeah, this was a all around complete game, for the Texas Longhorns, and you just look back and say, "Ah!" because when the more Bijan touches it, the more Quinn throws it. Um, when Texas has attempted 34 passes this season, they've lost, and when Bijan Robinson touches it, um, 30 times they're undefeated, but 25 times they're also undefeated. So, um, the more Bijan Robinson is involved, the better things are. And Taylor, he had like 3 Heisman worthy highlight reel runs, including that 31 yarder where he trucked 3 Kansas defenders. He trucked them. I mean, I don't know if you watch NFL's Good Morning Football. They have this segment called Angry Runs. Bijan Robinson would have won it going away on that run alone. And not to mention the 24-yard run where he zigzags, starts off right, goes back left, trucks a guy, stiff arms another guy, and is called out at the 1. And then he dives like old school Walter Payton over the pile, like got 4 feet in the air, did a somersault into the end zone. This guy was possessed. It was fun to watch, and I hope he gets some kind of notoriety here at the end of the year on the national award landscape.
Yeah, for sure. And Steve Sarkisian did talk about that in his post-game press conference. He talked about how, with Bijan playing such like really just in a fiery way. And he said a lot of times he does feel that Bijan Robinson's competitive spirit will be overlooked because he's such a nice guy when you talk to him off the field. But he was like, he has the fire and, of an elite competitor, and he Steve Sarkisian couldn't talk enough about that, and you saw it really on those plays. I mean, this is one of the you have to think about what college football is nowadays. When you're in a Bijan Robinson type of caliber of elite athlete, especially when you are draft eligible, more times than not, you probably have an agent in your ear being like, "Hey, buddy, like you've proven yourself. Maybe calm down a little bit just to protect yourself from injury or anything like that." But the fact that Bijan Robinson came out with a vengeance like this, and it kind of goes back, Chip, to what we were talking about earlier in the week, where I was like, Bijan seemed angry about last year's Kansas, not just the outcome from the Kansas game last year, but also that this was the team that injured him in that game. So he couldn't finish his sophomore season. And I had said, I was like, I want the best player on the team as angry as possible going into a game. And I really think Bijan showed up. And I would not be surprised if that really was part of the reason why he was running as angry and just with that fire in him today. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is a guy that is about to be probably a first round draft pick in the NFL draft, 2023 NFL draft. And the fact that he just was giving it his all, in this game when he's probably entering his.
He played 3 quarters. He only
Yeah,
played 3
exactly.
quarters.
Yeah, exactly. And he's entering probably his last game of his college career, and he still gives that effort. I mean, I can't say enough about Bijan Robinson as a player, as a person, everything, and just as a leader. And he doesn't have to be the vocal leader. He shows up on the field. He leads by example a lot of times too, and this was a huge example lead for him.
Yeah, it really was. If you're a Texas fan, you're pumped beyond belief. Just to see your team go on the road in frigid temperatures after having their hearts ripped out a week ago, and just set their mind, set their jaw, and get physical and run it down Kansas's throat. And look, Kansas, you take what the defense gives you. The Kansas defense has been suspect against the run, especially against up-tempo teams. Steve Sarkisian got down to it starting on that second possession after scaring the bleep out of us by going away from Bijan Robinson after Bijan had 2 carries for 14 yards, and they go 5 and out. But after that, it was hammer, meat, nail, and it was fun to watch because Bijan Robinson was the hammer today, and And Texas got a really good, clean win today. They weren't hurting themselves. They're Ari Temkin, our buddy, who's on SiriusXM radio, texted me at halftime and said, this may be too big of a lead for Texas to blow. Joking, Ari's a big Kansas grad. And they came out in the third quarter and they handled business. They stuffed KU and then they just went right back to running it and just built that lead. And, Kansas didn't get on the board until a minute 55 left in the third quarter. That's when they scored their first points. By that time, this thing was 41-0. So it was a really rock solid performance from the Texas defense, special teams, and from the Texas running game. Not just Bijan, although Bijan was outstanding. Roshan had 11 carries for 71 yards. Jonathan Brooks had 11 carries for 108 yards, 2 touchdowns. Roshan, 7 carries for 34 yards. That's a 5-yard per carry average. So really impressive. Hudson Card got in late, completed 1 pass. But all he needed to do was hand it off to Jonathan Brooks. And even Jaden Blue got in for 7 carries and 16 yards. So the whole roster should be feeling good after this one because everybody got in, Taylor.
Yeah, and I would say that what you probably hope for if you are Texas or a Texas fan is for Quinn Ewers to kind of regroup, I would say a little bit because, he has been struggling in recent games, but this game, if anything, goes to show that he doesn't have to be a hero. He's never had to be a hero this season, but it seems like there have been instances where either he feels like he needs to make the extra play or Steve Sarkisian wants to try to build his confidence by making the big type of, highlight worthy home run type of plays. But at the end of the day, when you have a running game like this and you have the amount of weapons that Texas does have on offense, you don't need Quinn Ewers to be a hero. What I would think if you're a Texas fan and you come out of this game, you're hoping that Quinn sees this as like, I don't need to push. I just need to do what I am supposed to do week in, week out. And I don't have to be the guy that everyone's talking about at the end of the game when I have this type of, of cast around him on the offensive side of the ball. And when you have a defense playing this well, with the end of the season coming up, I would say, especially with Quinn Ewers struggling a little bit in recent games, you just hope he learns from each game that he's playing, takes those learning experiences into the offseason, and make sure that he doesn't do it in games next year. And that's the best thing that you can ask for, I would say, from a first-time starter from year 1 to year 2, is to not make the same mistakes twice. You see it a lot with freshmen. I mean, it's just the reality. And I feel like people sometimes forget that Quinn Ewers is a freshman because we've been talking about him for 4 years now, whether he's a recruit or a player or whatever. But at the end of the day, I mean, his numbers are not going to blow you away in this game, but they don't necessarily have to. And what you hope for is that he recognizes that, takes it as just do what he's asked to do, not have to make the extra effort, not have to go the extra mile because he has guys around him. And even going into next season, he has a solid running back room still without Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson likely in the mix there.
Yeah. I think that's well said. Let's give a little love to Quinn Ewers, though. He did draw the defense off sides on 4th and 4. That's the first time he's been able to do that. So a first for Quinn Ewers at a crucial time. It did extend a touchdown drive. And then he and Xavier Worthy got together on a really nice, 24-yard completion. Worthy made a contested catch under tight coverage from Kobe Bryant. It was a really nice play. It was the kind of play that Texas needed early in that TCU game to kind of get into that rhythm. Texas just played ahead of the chains all night tonight and couldn't last week against TCU, which just throws the play caller off tremendously when you're constantly calling 2nd and 10 or, 3rd and 7 plus. So I thought those were a couple of smaller moments in the game that were worth pointing out, Taylor. But I don't know if you want to take any questions from those who are chiming in on our live stream here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. But this game next week against Baylor at home will be senior day. They call it senior day, but it will also be the final day, most likely for Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson. So you just hope that, and guys like DeMarvion Overshone, who I've really loved watching Overshone play this year because he's just thrown his body around. He's just gone for it. He's been purposefully reckless, and you got to have that on your defense, especially from a 6'4", 225-pound laser beam at linebacker. So, I hate the end of the college football season. I hate it. It's amazing. We kick off in August, and all of a sudden it's Thanksgiving. But this will be a good moment for Texas Longhorns fans to come to DKR and thank these, thank a superstar in Bijan Robinson, but thank this team, because this team has shown progress in year 2 under Steve Sarkisian. The record is not what Texas fans want. It's not what these players and coaches want. They'd love to have some plays back from that Texas Tech game, from that Oklahoma State game. Those 2 games to me were the most winnable. Alabama, you chalk that up to Bryce Young being the current Heisman Trophy winner, in TCU. As we mentioned, Sark could never get any kind of rhythm going offensively. So, but Taylor, I think there has been progress, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a team that was 5-7 last year, and they have 7 wins. So Texas cannot finish with a losing record this season. So you have to chalk that up coming off of a 5-7 year. But I wouldn't even say that the record really shows much. I feel like the thing that you have seen from Texas, especially coming out of losses this year, is they don't let the loss beat them twice, or they don't let certain scenarios beat them twice. Where last year, in year 1 under Steve Sarkisian, he talked a lot during the offseason leading up to last year about how, instilling a culture is not an overnight process. It takes time. And I think that Texas showed, and Texas fans realized last year, that a culture building process is definitely not going to happen in one season. You're going to start seeing the results year 2, year 3. Hopefully, I would say, if you're a fan, and you see positive results. And I would say that, I am very much not the participation trophy, everyone gets an award type of person. I'm kind of like, a loss is a loss, a win is a win, and you are what your record says. I will say, with Texas this year, in covering this program and seeing the difference in the culture from last year, and honestly years past, not even just under Steve Sarkisian. I mean, this has been going on for a while. The culture at Texas currently is better than I've seen in my career. And mind you, I did not cover, the Mac Brown era when Texas was playing for championships. I was still in school, and sometimes in high school back then. But I mean, I had not been covering. What was that?
Humble brag.
No, yeah, I know, right? I'm so young. No, but I haven't seen this type of culture at Texas. I don't think it's been there, honestly, since probably the early to mid 2000s, with Vince Young, Colt McCoy, and that cast that they had under Mac Brown, when they were winning 10 games and playing for championships more frequently. So this is something you have to chalk up as a win, because these young players there's a lot of veteran players that Texas is going to probably lose this year, but these young players have learned from those guys. And the hope is you see those young players take that culture and even make it better next year. But at this point, Chip, I would say that there's no reason to doubt that from happening. And that's a huge win that the record will not show for Texas in year 2 under Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah, I agree. And look, usually the championship type coaches reveal themselves in the first 3 years of their head coaching tenure at a school. And, the really good ones sometimes reveal it before then. But Um, Steve Sarkisian did have to rebuild the culture. And if you read The Insider at horns247.com this past week, Dan Neal, who I consider one of the voices of reason, former Longhorn All-American offensive lineman, guy who's done it in the trenches, won 2 Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos, knows what winning teams are all about, won 3 conference championships while he was at Texas, including that incredible upset over Nebraska in the very first Big 12 title game in 1996. He said, look, I care most about the culture, and getting the culture right is the most important step in the process of rebuilding. And he said, I think Sark is doing that. He said, I like the way this team plays. It plays hard. The defense has gotten steadily better. Texas has been incredibly impressive in a number of games offensively. Go back to the Oklahoma game where Quinn Ewers probably looked the best he's looked all season. And that's the frustrating part too, is that you want to see Ewers continue to progress. Now, it's probably no accident or not coincidence that Oklahoma's defense was in a little bit of free fall when Texas played them. And then he ran into all those 3 high safety, 3-8 cloud defenses against Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and TCU. And now, Kansas doesn't play that, and Ewers was better. And obviously he didn't need to be great because Texas ran the ball like crazy. Baylor will throw some of that 3 high safety look at Quinn Ewers. So let's see how much he's improved coming home to face this Baylor team. And let's see if Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, Jonathan Brooks can carry the load again in the running game against a Baylor defense that's been pretty tough against the run at times. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. They might be playing their way into the Cheez-It Bowl, Taylor, against North Carolina, or possibly the Alamo Bowl if TCU goes to the college football playoff and K-State goes to the Sugar Bowl. So we shall see.
Yeah. And one thing just real quick on Quinn Ewers and facing that 3-8 cloud type of defense, that's not something that he's probably ever faced, honestly, in his career. I mean, that's not a common high school style of defense. And remember, this is his first season he's played since his junior year of high school at South Lake Carroll. So it's a different thing that he's never faced. And that's kind of goes into the offseason hope for him, is that he learns from those experiences. They're not going to be great, but that's what happens when you have a first-time freshman quarterback starting. I mean, there were times where you looked at Sam Ehlinger his freshman year and it's just like, oh my gosh, this guy could have something. And then there's times where you're just like, what is he doing? And I think that maybe Quinn Ewers a lot of people didn't expect him to have those moments, but it's a freshman moment. That's why coaches will tell you, any coach you talk to, especially off the record, if they don't have a microphone in front of them and they're not having to rely on a freshman quarterback, is that they would rather redshirt quarterbacks and offensive linemen at any cost if they can. And so, those are those kind of teachable moments. And I'll take teachable moments over just a lack of talent any day. And I think any Texas fan should too. If they're making mistakes that are mistakes and it's not a physical thing with them that they are not going to be able to overcome, you chalk that as a win, especially if it's a young player, because those are things that you can coach out of them. Speaking of, real quick, Chip, Oklahoma's defense is it's bringing it tonight against Oklahoma State. It's 4:10 left in the third quarter. Oklahoma currently leads Oklahoma State 28-3. So that defense is back for Oklahoma.
That is the only thing that holds Mike Gundy back from getting the national recognition that he should get for constantly putting together, 9 and 10 win seasons at Oklahoma State, is his horrible record against OU. I think he's like 3-14 or some ridiculous. It's awful. And this, I get it. Oklahoma State's had injuries. Of course, they all happened in the Texas game. That's when Oklahoma State broke because the next week K-State beat them 48-0. And that's why actually, if Kansas, well, no, never mind. Oklahoma State's getting paddled by OU. If they would have beaten OU and there was a 3-way tie for second place, Texas would have advanced because of the point differential. Basically because K-State beat Oklahoma State 48-0. But that's not a factor anymore. Oklahoma State's out of the mix. So Taylor, we'll see what next week brings, but on a cold, frosty day in Lawrence, Kansas, Texas warmed the hearts of their fan base. Bijan Robinson certainly warmed the hearts of the fan base, which will get one more regular season game with Bijan Robinson next week on Friday at 11 a.m. against the Baylor Bears at DKR. So, Taylor, any parting shots here before we sign off?
No, I would just say Texas fans, give Bijan credit where credit is due. If he doesn't play in a bowl game, I wouldn't blame him, honestly, at this point. He has done everything he can. This performance, against Kansas, when he's not fighting for, a college. It's still kind of a slim chance that Texas even does make it to a Big 12 title game, and you still get this performance of him. Just acknowledge him. I saw Longhorn Network posted a video of him talking to fans, signing autographs, everything. He was the last player on the field in Lawrence, Kansas today, coming off of that performance. He's a special guy. And I'll say this, we talked about this earlier in the week on the flagship podcast. There is an instance on Monday when we had interviews with Bijan Robinson, and he was asked about, we know you're not going to say what the future kind of holds, or if these are going to be your last few games or anything. And he kind of ignored the question, and a media member said, "We'll miss you too." And we all laughed about it. Obviously we see the writing on the wall. It's the right move, especially for a running back, but it's been really cool to cover him too, Chip. There are very few people I think that we will see in our careers that are like Bijan Robinson. So Texas fans, embrace him while you got him. I'd say that.
No doubt about it. This kid is a special kid. He's got presence. He's got charisma. He's, devoutly faithful to his Christian beliefs. And it's refreshing to see a guy who just smiles at everybody, has time for everybody, even though he's, he could easily try to duck the spotlight and so many demands on his time. And fortunately for him, he's getting paid for it now with NIL opportunities. But he's going to make a lot more money in the NFL than he can off of the NIL opportunities here. But, maybe he'll put in a good word, and maybe Jordan Whittington might stick around for another season. So, but that we will take up next week on our flagship podcast in advance of Texas Baylor. We'll also have a flagship podcast interview with David Smoke of Sikkim365.com, previewing that Texas Baylor game at the start of the week. So stay tuned, everybody. For Taylor Estes, I'm Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you're subscribed to our Horns 24/7 YouTube channel and to our flagship podcast. Wherever you listen to your podcast, feel free to give us a 5-star review at iTunes, or tell your friends and enemies, for crying out loud, to listen, because we're year round on the flagship podcast. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. Until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.